it was like Flight Simulator levels of good playing with this stick on Top Gun. So I will give it that. But besides that, other than the fact that it worked, I had one. I did. I had one as a kid, and it was cool. But we used it. There's one of those things where we used it a couple times, and I'm like, you know what? No thanks. No thanks.
The only problem with it is like that flight stick was really cool. It had like a reflective foil on the bottom because like you had buttons that you pressed, and it like flaps that opened and closed, and that was how it knew it like was working or whatever. But the only problem with it was you had to keep the manual because inside the manual,
the switches.
There was 4 switches on that thing that are listed there. And you have to turn the first one up, the second one down, third one neutral. You had to kind of figure out which one it was. But in the manual, it told you for Kung Fu, use this. For Top Gun, use this.
And then it told you which section
to use. Like how
moving and punches and kicks.
Right. Yeah. So like if you had no manual, and thank God I still have it, you're beat.
You're beat.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the internet back then, come on, we didn't have the internet when we were like 10, 5, whatever. You were beat.
Even if you had, what I would say like maybe early teens, we had AOL. Nobody uploaded the manual for U4C.
No.
Nobody uploaded the manual. You'd have to go into like, an adults only chat room and say, hey, does anybody have the U4C? Like, do you have the manual?
Dangerous.
Would never happened.
That was its only downside. Otherwise, it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. It was cool, but it's very nostalgic. But not having the manual destroys that controller.
Okay, and that is in my book what I would consider definitely a peripheral, but it's actually more of a controller than other things are.
Okay,
than like a gun. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting. Corey, what do you got for number 5?
All right, so let's start off by saying I built mine really on like innovation. I don't think I have any peripherals on here. I do not have VR controllers on here because I think that is a good list to do, and I don't own a virtual reality system, and I know you do, Doug, so I'm sure that might show up on the list. But something else that I don't have controllers that are super innovative, but then have failed as a system. So let's take, for instance, like the Wii controller. Awesome. Really, really innovative, but I don't think it was supported that well. I can't think of, I don't know. That's on there. Like the Switch. The Switch just came out. Really great controller, but we'll see what Nintendo eventually does with it. So that out of the way. My number 5, I'm following the system with you guys, NES, but the NES Advantage. Okay,
the arcade stick.
The arcade stick. Okay, for a few reasons. One, I don't have to hold this small rectangle. I can set it down like on the floor or on my lap, but it has the turbo button option and the slow-mo option with certain games, which was, I don't know why you would ever use it, but it was cool that it was on there. So it had those really big, buttons, the AB buttons, and then the giant joystick, which was cool.
Now, slow-mo, that didn't slow the game down.
It constantly paused and unpaused the game that you were playing. How great is that?
I did not know that was on there. I did not know that.
It constantly just keeps pressing the start button when you turn slow mode on. But it was cool.
That is so stupid.
But games like Jaws, and you have the turbo button.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my number 5. Sticking with the NES.
It's interesting that you mentioned that it's an arcade stick because I am a massive arcade stick player, and I will play with my arcade stick for any game that I can. I actually have. It's going to be one of my honorable mentions. I have an arcade stick, but to have an arcade stick, back then on Nintendo, especially for adults, because adults more so played games in the arcade, and I didn't appreciate the advantage at the time. I didn't care, although I frequented the arcade as a kid. Adults who really was in there, like playing Pac-Man and stuff, and games like Donkey Kong. Like, imagine now being at home and playing Donkey Kong, which you've been playing in the arcade for years, with an arcade controller. It's a completely different feeling. You know what I mean? Like if I'm playing Galaga on Xbox Live Arcade with my arcade stick versus a controller, it's a different feeling, man. It just feels more authentic. So
agreed.
I'm gonna go into number 4. Oh no, Corey, you start number. Oh wait, Chris, you're gonna start number 4.
We'll keep
okay.
the same.
Okay, we'll go circle.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna do number 4. lots of disagreements here, I think. But this is actually from my favorite console, Sega Dreamcast. This is on the innovation route, and the one thing I love about the Dreamcast, which everybody already knows, right? Like, you know why the Dreamcast controller is the greatest thing of all time. Is this guy right here. So the Dreamcast has its memory unit, which constantly ran out of batteries, and I'll explain why, is a game. It's a controller, right? There it is. Now, you don't play Dreamcast games with it, but for games like Power Stone, Power Stone had a mode on there where you can earn money and buy different items that would come out into gameplay. Oops, sorry. That would come out into gameplay. You could buy different guns, swords, all types of stuff, right? So now you could earn money on the go with this device and play mini games. They had a slot machine. They had a game that played like River Raid, which is like a vertical scrolling shooter, and they had one other one too. But you played games, and I think in the Sonic game you had you actually use this like a Tamagotchi, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So here I am now. I have my memory unit, and I'm earning money for this game on the go. And when I come home, I put it in, and I can buy new items and stuff. That to me was crazy. Mm-hmm. And for what it is, this thing right here, it actually doesn't feel terrible. It doesn't feel terrible. The buttons are soft, like rubber buttons. They're not plastic. They kind of feel like what I would consider like a Tiger handheld. And the D-pad, you can hit the corners, and it's tiny. It's tiny. One other thing that I loved about it before I almost just destroyed it, you could actually have the memory card itself went in the controller. It went in the controller. Now, what options does that open up? Well, if you have 4 players and 4 different characters, you each have your own save, and you can do different things, you know. And each one has 2, which makes the controller very heavy if you have 2 of them in there. But I like a weighty controller anyway. Having the D-pad and the analog on the same side sucks, without a doubt. It does. So that basically limits you to using one or the other per game. The analog's not bad. The D-pad is phenomenal. The reason why is because they actually did pay Nintendo to have a cross.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They had to pay Nintendo for that, to do that.
Wow.
And then the analog sticks on here. The triggers were analog, and nothing had that back then. So, as a example, on NBA 2K, when you took a free throw, it had 2 arrows, and you had to match them up in the middle. And the way you did that was you had to slowly press in the analog sticks until they matched, and if you went too far, they would cross. You know what I mean?
Right.
So to have that back then, I thought was really great too, and that is why I think the Dreamcast controller is my number 4. Chris?
Okay. Mine again is another really nostalgic controller. It used the NES controller and your body for the controls. I never owned it, but my cousin did. Again, our grandmother. No. Not even the Power Glove. That thing is a piece of garbage. We all know this.
It was the coolest stuff.
It looks
very cool.
I would wear a Power Glove every day,
right?
If they had a lefty Power Glove, I would wear them both.
No, it was another thing. Like, our grandmother. Video games are really new. So what do we get the kids? Oh, let's get her this rock and roller.
Oh my God, man! You know what? I should disconnect your call right now.
Yo, it was so much fun. The rock and roller for NES. You stood on it. It was like, because back then they had that, I think it was like a satellite ball or something, or the Saturn ball. It was like a ball that had a disc around it that you stood on, and you would like hop around on it.
Yeah, it was like a single moon shoe type of bouncy thing.
Yeah,
I could never. You know what? Maybe that's why I didn't like the rock and roller, because I couldn't bounce on it.
Maybe, yeah. So it was like, I think it was kind of playing off of that. I think it was around the same time, but it was like, had that ball on the bottom. It wasn't a ball. It was hard plastic. I don't know how we didn't break it as kids. And you stood on it, and it did have a weight limit that was like, I think 120 pounds or something. It was like, if you were a real kid, you really couldn't stand on it. Okay. And you moved your body left and right to control like how you wanted to play. And you used the controller to, like, if you were playing like Paperboy or something, to like throw or to punch or to move, or to jump if you're Mario. But I just remember having a really good time as a kid standing on it, and it was fun to practice your balance, and it worked really well. Like when we first got it, it was amazing. Like we were playing Super Mario Brothers 3 like really, really well. Like we weren't having problems with it. And then it did start to break, and I don't know if it was because it was made of plastic that it was plastic, so it just wasn't hard enough to hold us. I guess it started to crack, and maybe it was kind of losing its thing. But it was, and it's kind of innovative. Like that's why I kind of put it on the list as well, because I wanted to put some innovation into it, and it was pretty cool. Like we had the Wii controller, that you moved around and stuff. But back then you had something. I guess it used gyros. I should have really researched it. I guess
I would definitely put that if you're gonna like. Innovation is the Wii balance board, right?
Right.
It's basically the same thing, but was a lot crappier. And I could definitely see it breaking because even just the momentum of teetering it, like it's gonna like I'm surprised it wouldn't just snap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it was curved on the bottom. It was designed well, but they shouldn't have used plastic.
Yeah.
But it was pretty cool, and like I said, I put it on this because it was kind of innovative at the time. To not just use your controller, they were just trying to fish for different crap to put out there for kids to buy,
Mm-hmm.
But we had a really good time with it. And I thought it was pretty cool.
That brings up a good point, though, Chris. Going back and really listening to you with all these controllers, Nintendo, in the NES days, they were already thinking ahead, right?
Way ahead.
All
Way
these
ahead.
ways to play video game consoles. But then after that, I think after the NES. They kind of stopped making those types of controllers until the Wii finally came back out. So
they had. I mean, they made a couple peripherals. I mean, like they kept up with the Advantage for Super. You know what I mean?
But motion type controllers.
Yeah, motion, no, definitely.
That was pretty. I don't know. They might have changed direction, and then they came back in with the Wii. So you could see already back in the early days they were already thinking ahead.
And they had like dumb stuff too, like the activator. You know what the activator is? That like you stood in like a ring for Sega.
Oh yeah, and you like move your hands.
It didn't work how they wanted to at all. It's basically like a giant U-force for your body. That's how it worked. Yeah. Then they had the Interactor, which they're actually they're redoing those for VR stuff. They're making things that you put on your chest that goes through the subwoofer, the low bass channels, and vibrates you while you play. Which is,
I've seen this. Yeah.
No, for me, no thanks. No thanks. Unless I feel like my arm got blown off when I got shot in the arm. Boosh. Yeah. So I'm just not down for that. I had one
for a day and I returned it because it didn't do what I wanted it to.
Yeah. Corey, what's your number 4?
So my number 4, moving up a generation, is the SNES controller.
Okay.
For a few reasons. Of course, it had the curves. I liked it. It felt more comfortable. It introduced the L and R buttons. And it also had 4, just the number of buttons on this controller is really what did it for me.
Right.
It went from 2 to 4. Sega only had 3, right? 4 in the main
6,
side.
man. Shoulders or buttons?
Well, yes. Yeah, it had 4 in the front and then 2 on the top. So 6 buttons, it really allowed you to just do more in a game.
Yeah.
And even there were certain games that buttons, let's just say that X button didn't do anything for.
Right.
So they had way more options than what was needed, but it was great when you came upon a game that used everything. And even like fighting games, like Street Fighter.
You had 6 buttons.
You could do your light, medium, and heavy.
Sega, you couldn't. Unless you had the Sega specific one, with the 6 buttons.
So I think that's simply it's just the number of options that you could have in a controller, and it just felt better. As we grew up, it kind of got bigger with our hands again.
Mm-hmm.
The Nintendo felt like it was a system that like grew with us and kept developing controller wise. So
yeah. Now it's funny, like it had the curve. Clearly, this is modeled. This came out way after SNES, but it's modeled after it, right? Like it's the same exact shape. It's just the top isn't flat because there's no shoulders.
Right.
The SNES pad, I will say, is definitely one of the most comfortable as far as retro pads. One thing that I like design wise is that the A and B buttons are convex. And then X and Y are concave, so you can feel them. You can feel where you are and stuff. Mind you, you would know, but you could feel that the buttons are different there. You know what I mean? And again, having those shoulders at the time in the beginning wasn't natural when you